Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to address one of the most important issues facing American veterans and one of the great medical dilemmas facing our entire country. And that is that over 70,000 veterans of the Persian Gulf War, including hundreds in my own state of Vermont, continue to suffer from Gulf War illness. And 6 years after the completion of that war, there is still no understanding of the cause of that illness and no effective treatment for it. As you know, Mr. Chairman, Chris Shays, who is the chairman of the Human Resources Subcommittee, has held 10 hearings on Gulf War illness since March of 1996. As a member of that committee, I cannot begin to express the frustration that many of us feel regarding the ineptitude of the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration in responding adequately and effectively to the needs of those veterans who continue to hurt. Pure and simple, the bottom line is that 6 years after the end of the Persian Gulf War, the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration still have not developed an understanding of the cause of Gulf War illness or an effective treatment protocol. In fact, their record has been so inadequate that several weeks ago, the Presidential Advisory Committee on Persian Gulf War Veterans Illnesses indicated that it will be recommending to the President that an independent agency outside of the Pentagon take responsibility for investigating the health effects of low-level chemical and biological weapons exposures. According to Arthur L. Kaplan, a bioethics professor at the University of Pennsylvania and a member of that panel, I quote, "The Pentagon is not credible to continue inquiries that veterans and the public do not find persuasive," end of quote. And the New York Times writes in discussing that issue, and I quote from the New York Times, "A special White House panel said today that the Pentagon had lost so much credibility in its investigation of the release of Iraqi chemical weapons in the 1991 Persian Gulf War that oversight of the investigation must be taken away from the Defense Department permanently," end of quote from the New York Times. Mr. Chairman, I am happy to inform my colleagues that there is language in the committee report of Labor HHS, which passed the House today, language which I introduced, which funds an independent scientific research program into how chemical exposures in the Persian Gulf relate to the illnesses suffered by 70,000 of our veterans. This research program is to be implemented through the Secretary of Health with the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences as the lead agency. The committee has agreed to appropriate $1.1 million for next year and $7 million over a 5-year period. What is important here, and it is very important, is that for the first time, a governmental agency outside of the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs is going to take a hard look at the role that chemicals may have played in causing Gulf War illness. This is a major breakthrough, and we've got to continue in that effort. This report language is strongly supported by the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and the National Gulf War Resource Center. Veterans and Americans all over this country are, to say the least, less than impressed about the role that DOD and VA have played in this entire process from the very end of the war till today. Mr. Chairman, the military theater in the Persian Gulf was a chemical cesspool. Our troops were exposed to chemical warfare agents, leaded petroleum, widespread use of pesticides, depleted uranium, and burning oil wells. In addition, they were given a myriad of pharmaceuticals as vaccines. Further, and perhaps most importantly, as a result of a waiver from the FDA, hundreds of thousands of our troops were given pyridostigmine bromide. Pyridostigmine bromide, which was being used as an anti-nerve gas agent, had never been used in this capacity before. Under an agreement between the DOD and the FDA in regards to this waiver, the DOD was required to collect data on any use of pyridostigmine mine bromide. However, they failed to do that. Mr. Chairman, we are beginning to make some progress by going outside of the DOD and the VA. It is a breakthrough. We have got to continue in that direction in order to address this enormously serious problem. Thank you.